inflating the values of assets by whatever means necessary to increase Mr. Trump's purported net worth. And then that net worth was used to further enhance his financial standing, intentionally misrepresenting his financials to obtain incredible economic benefit. It was a scheme that, by its very nature, became more profitable over time. And it is all in stark violation of the law. As I mentioned earlier, the relief that we are seeking specifically, we are asking the court, again, to permanently bar Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump from serving as an officer or director in any corporation or similar business entity registered or licensed in New York State. We are barring Mr. Trump and his organization from entering into any New York State commercial real estate acquisition for 5 years. We are barring Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization from applying for any loans from any financial institution registered with the New York Department of Financial Services for 5 years. We are requiring Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization to disgorge the financial benefits obtained through the persistent fraudulent practices, an estimated, a baseline, at the minimum of $250 million, and to appoint an independent monitor at the Trump Organization to oversee compliance, financial reporting, evaluations, and disclosures to lenders, insurers, and tax authorities for no less than 5 years. We are requiring the Trump Organization to prepare on an annual basis for the next 5 years a GAAP, a generally accepted accounting practices compliant audited statement of financial condition showing Mr. Trump's net worth to be distributed to all the recipients of his prior statements of financial condition. To replace the current trustees of the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust with new independent trustees, or require similar independent governance if a new trust is created, and to permanently bar Alan Weisselberg and Jeffrey McConney from serving in the financial control of any New York corporation. And lastly, to cancel any certificate filed under and by virtue of the provisions of Section 130 of the General Business Law for the corporate entities named as defendants and any other entity controlled by or beneficially owned by Donald Trump, which participated in or benefited from the ongoing financial scheme. In other words, permanently prohibit any of these companies from doing business in the state of New York. I want to be clear. White-collar financial crime is not a victimless crime. When the well-connected break the law to take in more money that they are entitled to, it reduces resources to working people, to regular people, to small businesses, and to all taxpayers. Everyday people cannot lie to a bank about how much money they have in order to get a favorable loan to buy a home or to send their kid to college. And if they did, the government would throw the book at them. Why should this be any different? It is a tale of two justice systems, one for everyday working people and one for the elite, the rich and the powerful. Mr. Trump and his allies may say that these penalties are too harsh or that this is part of a witch hunt. I will remind everyone that this investigation only started after Michael Cohen, his former lawyer, testified before Congress and shed light on this misconduct. And the remedies are consistent with what we have sought for other businesses that committed the same misconduct. This investigation revealed that Donald Trump engaged in years of illegal conduct to inflate his net worth, to deceive banks and the people of the great state of New York. Claiming you have money that you do not have does not amount to the art of the deal. It's the art of the steal. And there cannot be different rules for different people in this country or in this state. And former presidents are no different. And so today we are making good on that promise, on our commitment, because no one is above the law. and I would like for them to stand. This investigation was led by Senior Enforcement Counsel Kevin Wallace, Senior Counsel Andrew Amer, Assistant Attorney General Colleen Faherty, Assistant Attorney General Alex Finkelstein, Assistant Attorney General Will Handley, Assistant Attorney General Stephanie Torre, Assistant Attorney General Austin Thompson, Special Counsel to the Solicitor General Eric Herron, Enforcement Section Chief Louis Solomon, Legal Support Analyst Samantha Stern. Additional support was provided by a data analyst, Anusha Chaudhary, Senior Data Analyst, Akram Hashanoff, Data Scientist, Chun-Soo Song, Deputy Director of Research and Analytics, Megan Thorsfeld, Director of Research and Analytics, Jonathan Werberg, as well as Information Technology Specialist, Yu-Sing Chin, and Information Technology Specialist, Paige Puldoni, Information Technology Specialist, John Roach. Appellate support was provided by Deputy Solicitor General Judy Vale, Assistant Solicitor General Eric Del Pozo, all under the oversight of First Deputy Attorney General Jennifer Levy. I thank you for your service. You may have a seat. Now, I know that I've provided you with a lot of numbers, a lot of property. Members of the team will be available to answer any specific questions, but at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Delaney, who's going to lead the Q&A on on-topic questions. Thank you. Delaney?
Yes, Attorney
Sorry,
General.
can I just introduce yourself and say your
Sorry, Jonathan Deans with NBC.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, you say that there was criminality involved here. I was wondering if you've referred this to the Manhattan DA as well. You've been part of that investigation. And should we expect to see state charges out of the Manhattan DA's office?
As you know, there is a parallel criminal investigation being conducted by the District Attorney of Manhattan. And we are cooperating with the Manhattan District Attorney, and any information that he is requesting, we will submit it to his office. We cooperate with any law enforcement agency, including but not limited to the Manhattan DA. Thank you.
Adam Reese, NBC. You said that his career and his empire was basically a sham and smoke and mirrors. Can you just describe, are you trying to shut him down, and where do we go from here?
So, again, this investigation has to do with his statements of financial condition over a period of 2011 to 2021. And this is an attempt to seek redress for the taxpayers of the great state of New York, for individuals in the great state of New York. And he could reconstruct, reorganize a number of these corporations. But the relief that we are seeking from this judge is, again, for him to reform his practices in the state of New York and to prohibit him from engaging in any real estate commercial transactions in the state of New York going forward.
Ms. James, as you note these, I apologize, Henry Rossoff with Pix 11. As you note, these allegations are at least 3 years old. That's the origin of your investigation. The DOJ and IRS have had access to the same starting points that you did. With these referrals, do you hope to force their hand into action?
It's not a question of forcing their hands. It's a question of presenting to them evidence, which we believe suggests illegality and suggests that he was engaging in a number of schemes to benefit himself, his corporation, and his family. And so we will present this information to the District Attorney of New York if he requested, as well as the Southern District of New York and the IRS, based on the allegations that we uncovered, based on the evidence that we uncovered.
Harris Canales, CNN. Are you willing to settle with the Trump Organization? And if so, what terms would be appropriate and favorable for you that you would agree to settle?
I will not negotiate in public. And as you know, has been publicly reported, we rejected settlement offers that they submitted, and our doors are always open.
Washington Post. It's been suggested by Mr. Trump and his advocates that they were engaging in standard practices. This is standard in the real estate business. How is what they were doing different from standard practice here? And can you comment on that defense that they're offering?
You know, This conduct cannot be brushed aside and dismissed as some sort of good faith mistake. The statements of financial condition were greatly exaggerated, grossly inflated, objectively false, and therefore fraudulent and illegal. And as a result of that, we are seeking relief, and Mr. Trump, the Trump Organization, his family, they should all be held accountable. And that is the purpose of this litigation that we are filing today, in addition to referring the criminal conduct to the Southern District of New York, as well as the IRS. No one, my friend, is above the law.
I'm Marcia Kramer from CBS, Madam Attorney General. I have a two-part question. Number one, is there anything to prevent Mr. Trump from establishing his corporations, even for the properties in New York, in another state, since he has now become a legal resident of Florida? And secondly, you called it, Donald Trump Jr. has already started tweeting that this, quote, the Democratic witch hunt has begun, if you'd like to respond to that as well.
So with regards to the name calling, as you know, they've basically have attempted to delay this investigation, and two judges have dismissed those claims that this was a political witch hunt. So I give no credence to those to the names that he has referred to me. And two, Mr. Trump, the Trump Organization, as well as his family, will still have to deal with this complaint. They will still have to respond. They will still have to respond to the allegations therein. And so if, in fact, he decided to move to Florida, the reality is he still has to deal with the great state of New York and respond to the complaint.
Establish another corporation, put these properties in a corporation that he incorporates in another state?
No, he
Could be
cannot.
any state other than New York?
Correct. These corporations are currently incorporated in the state of New York. Some are incorporated in Delaware, but they do business in the state of New York. And he cannot just pick up and those same corporations can be moved to Florida. No. And again.
Laura Italiano from Insider. In practical terms, much of former President Trump's biggest money-generating properties are in Manhattan, in New York State. Would he, if this relief is granted by the judge down the road, would he be able to collect rents, to obtain loans on the properties? What practical implications to sell the properties should he want to? Is the incorporation that's filed in New York necessary for him to do those things?
So again, most of the corporations have been incorporated in the state of New York. There are some that have been incorporated in Delaware, but they continue to do business in the state of New York. We are permanently barring Mr. Trump and his family members from serving as an officer or director in any entity in the state of New York. We are barring him from entering into any commercial real estate transactions for 5 years. We are barring Mr. Trump and the organization from applying for any loans for 5 years, just for 5 years, requiring him to repay the financial benefits of $250 million, placing a monitor over these corporations, requiring him to file a GAAP-compliant statement of financial condition, replacing the trustees, if in fact he creates a new trustee, and permanently barring Alan Weisselberg and Jeffrey McConney, and canceling his certificate of incorporations for those corporations that we discussed. Yes.
Follow-up. Are these reliefs that a judge would have to approve?
Yes.
So these things aren't happening at the moment?
Correct.
But this is what will be litigated now down the line?
Correct. And it's important also to understand that Mr. Trump will continue to have a financial interest in a lot of these corporations. And so if he decides to, at some point in time, sell them, or if he decides to restructure them, again, this is all part of the relief that we are seeking. I said to Marcia that we're seeking to dissolve them. That was incorrect. We're not seeking to dissolve them. He still has a financial interest in these businesses and corporation.
Meaning he still owns them?
Correct.
However, to collect rent, to obtain a loan based on them as collateral, to sell the property, Maybe I'm missing some other practical things. If approved by a judge down the road, these are things he would not be able to do with those properties.
Correct. For the next 5 years.
We're going to take 2 more questions.
Hi, Josh Gerstein with Politico.
Yeah.
Madam Attorney General, can you explain something about how the former president, you allege he did this for at least a decade or more than a decade. How did he get away with what you're saying he got away with for such a long period of time? A lot of these transactions are with some of the largest financial institutions and insurance companies in the state of New York. Did they just not check anything that people tell them, or they presumed it was true, or did they have hints that these things were not true that they were being told? And what does it tell you about those institutions that they would take his word for it?
So let me just say, with respect to Mazars indicated on the statement of financial condition that they did not certify and they did not audit these statements. That does not absolve Mr. Trump of submitting accurate information. 2, with respect to Cushman Wakefield, there is an ongoing investigation into Cushman Wakefield. And then lastly, with respect to Deutsche Bank, we're in conversations with Deutsche Bank. They have been cooperating with our office.
Last question, Morgan. Fox 5, do you feel like this lawsuit is going to be resolved quickly, or do you feel like this is going to be a drawn-out process?
So that's entirely up to the judge. That's good? Okay. I thank you all for coming, and if there's any specific questions, I believe my members of the team will answer your questions. Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to New York Attorney General Letitia James, and there is a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack with what she just unloaded. Basically, it's a $250 million civil lawsuit against Donald Trump and the other defendants, she called them, his children and the corporation. Basically, she's talking about white-collar crimes. She says they are not victimless crimes, that he grossly inflated his net worth over the years for his benefit, financial benefit. We want to break this all down. We have investigative reporter Catherine Falders with us, and ABC News Supreme Court contributor Kate Shaw with us as well. Catherine, let's start with you. Just set the stage, because if people joined us late, there was a lot of information that she just laid out against the Trump Organization.
Yeah, so look, the New York AG has filed this lawsuit that is 28 pages long. She said the complaint went through a number of examples where Trump and those who are working for him were valuing his assets, were inflating them significantly, she alleges, for tax purposes. She mentioned at one point that Trump saved $150 million in interest rates that was based on these false statements of valuation of his assets. Now, what she is doing is suing the New York AG. She's suing Trump, the Trump Organization. She mentioned Don Jr., Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump, his adult children, also 2 top executives at the Trump Organization for alleged bank fraud. She says tax fraud and insurance fraud. She's making criminal referrals to the IRS, she said, in the Southern District of New York. And look, the lawsuit states
we deserve this assistance and this international help to strengthen institutions. And also, these officials are working selflessly. I want to take advantage of this opportunity to work together also to combat against gender violence. In the case of Ecuador, the disappearance of a courageous woman, a lawyer, a mother, and daughter, should be the symbol of this challenge, of the challenge of combating against violence against women. Ecuador has demonstrated that we're there for the world. The world can count on us, and I'm sure that the world will support us and help us in these challenges. In the area of human mobility, we have taken decisions that have been applauded these days. We're not only maintaining our long trajectory as a transit country, a country that welcomes and is a refuge for migrants, but also traditionally we have been one of the biggest host countries of refugees in the entire Western Hemisphere. But beyond simply welcoming refugees, I want to refer to the treatment that those citizens receive when they enter our country. In Ecuador, we make special efforts to guarantee the rights, and especially, more importantly, the integration of migrants, particularly when we're talking about families whose countries of origin do not offer alternatives of a better life, and these people have no other option other than to flee. For example, 500,000 Venezuelans who today live in Ecuador. We're one of the three main destinations for migrants from this country, and in spite of our budgetary difficulties, we provide assistance to this population with healthcare, education, and other social services. We have also begun a long process of regularization of their status. Just think, Mr. President, what this means in a small country such as ours. Now, think about the impact of a population of that size would have on each one of your countries. This is why I repeat, Ecuador is there for the world. The world can count on Ecuador, and I know that the world will support us with this plan for regularizing the status of our Venezuelan brethren who have had to flee their country. I have the firm hope that this will be the case. But it's not just that. Ecuador is also fulfilling its responsibility in the climate crisis as a country that is the emitter of greenhouse gases. We represent barely 0.18% of global emissions, and yet, without the need to wait or the need to suggest to us, my government took the decision to convert Ecuador in the first country in Latin America and the fourth in the world to adopt a cross-cutting policy towards environmental transition, including creating a special ministry for this. And this is not merely an issue of how much a country has industrialized in the past, but rather how much a country can contribute in the future. This is why almost a year ago, in the framework of the conference, the climate conference in Glasgow, I announced the creation of a new marine reserve called Hermandad, or Brotherhood, in the Galapagos Islands, which increased by 60,000 square kilometers the protected area of this natural heritage site of humanity. That same year, this was further complemented with the signature of a declaration for the preservation and management of ecosystems included in the marine corridor of the East Tropical Pacific. This was we signed this together with my colleagues from the presidents of Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama, to provide a new dimension and political impetus to the goals of the marine corridor. Thus, we are opening new opportunities for cooperation, financing, and technical assistance for the conservation not only of equatorial biodiversity or regional biodiversity, but rather global biodiversity. But we're more ambitious. We're looking beyond that. It's in this same very institution where we have promoted the mandate of the General Assembly on the environment in order to negotiate a future treaty on the plastic pollution. And so in the area of environmental conservation, Ecuador is also there for the world. Mr. President, in each one of the topics I have mentioned here, in each one of these challenges and uncertainties that the future holds before us, Ecuador supports a conviction that we need to find the responses within ourselves. In our understanding that we as human beings share this planet Earth, and what we have in common is much bigger than what divides us, what separates us. And in fact, it could happen that we are not even aware that we have in our hands keys to solve problems that other nations or other individuals are confronting. In fact, that is what happened with Mateo, the student that we managed to transport from Ukraine. If on each challenge we apply that form of thinking, if we dare to tackle each threat from a common position, we will go much farther. For example, take the food crisis, which today has been aggravated by the conflict in Ukraine, and that has meant the worsening of malnutrition in various countries. International figures speak of 52 million children younger than 5 years of age that today suffer malnutrition. 17 million suffer from acute malnutrition, and 155 million suffer from stunted growth. In Ecuador, this problem affects some 30% of children younger than 2 years of age, and in the most tragic cases, in some of our poorest provinces, the figure is above 35% of malnutrition. To confront this problem, my government has been a pioneer. We have created a technical secretariat. It's called Ecuador Develops Without Child Malnutrition, and I have set a very clear goal for my term: reduce during my term of government by 6 percentage points the malnutrition of children, and we have ensured the participation of civil society, academia, the private sector, and local governments in these efforts. And however, we can certainly do even more. We can dare to think as a global community. I won't be revealing any kind of secret to you if I tell you how fertile is the land in Ecuador, how productive our land is, if that land is worked with optimism and dedication. We are the country where cocoa is grown, banana, where we produce shrimp, but also avocado and a lot of other agricultural goods. It makes no sense that our children, or children from anywhere in the world, suffer hunger. In this situation or any other situation, and especially given that the land is there to be harvested, not only for food, but also for opportunities. This new Ecuador today represents advantages that could serve not only to ease hunger, but also to create this world that is more stable and peaceful that I mentioned, where citizens are included on every single day, feel more included through the creation of opportunities. That is the world that I see. That is the world that today we are proposing to you from Ecuador. Lastly, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, former Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, said, peace is a form of being, of relating to others, of living on this planet. It cannot be decreed only through treaties. It must be nourished with rights and the abilities and skills of every single individual. End of quote. I believe that in very few words that encapsulates the spirit of what I've tried to say, and I will take this opportunity to express the support of Ecuador for the efforts of the Secretary General, the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. I would like to, in conclusion, thank everyone for the overwhelming support for the election of my country as a member of the Security Council for the period 2023-2024. Our participation will take place in a context in which humankind is experiencing a period of uncertainty and unprecedented challenges. But you can always be certain that, as we have always done, Ecuador will be there, fulfilling its duty to the world. We will conduct ourselves with coherency and transparency, with an emphasis on supporting humanitarian assistance and peacekeeping operations, on the protection of civilians in situation of armed conflict, on the agenda of women, peace, and security, on the fight against arms trafficking, and always addressing emerging challenges in the context of sustaining peace. In all this, and each decision, and each effort at mediation, and each opportunity to contribute to the stability and peace of our planet, you can be certain, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, that Ecuador will be there for you and for your citizens. Ecuador will be there for the world. Thank you very much for your kind attention for this intervention. May God bless us all.
I wish to thank the Constitutional President of the Republic of Ecuador for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Hakainde Hichilema, President of the Republic of Zambia, and to invite him to.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Korosi, President of the 77th Session of the United Nations General Assembly, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, first, we congratulate you, Mr. President, on your election as the seventh President of the UN General Assembly. With your vast experience, we're confident that you will successfully provide the required leadership during your tenure as President of the General Assembly. We pay tribute, of course, in the same manner to Mr. Abdallah Shahid for his unwavering dedication and good stewardship during the 76th session of the General Assembly. Mr. President, Your Excellencies, we meet here at a very difficult time, a time when global challenges have not only multiplied, but have become more complex. Such challenges include the COVID-19 pandemic, the climate change, the war in Ukraine, and the associated effects of the supply chain disruptions, food insecurity around the world, the high commodity and energy prices, as well as the overall high cost of living, which have cast a dark shadow on the attainment of the SDGs. on our continent. The risk and the world. The risk of reversal in the hard-won developmental gains is ever so real. COVID-19 unmasked the global inequalities which stretch well beyond income and political boundaries, as evidenced through the varied access to vaccines. The risk of further inequality is also real, especially for us developing countries which have inadequate capacity to adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change, despite our insignificant carbon footprint. Sadly so. This is truly a defining moment of our time, where collective efforts must be channeled to address the numerous challenges that we face. Mr. President, it is why Zambia welcomes the challenge on building our common agenda and endorsed the call to convene the Summit for the Future. We call for the attainment of a pact for the future that underwrites a new form of multilateralism in our world, one where major challenges are faced together in solidarity within a context of revitalized international order that is rules-based, number one, number two, fair and inclusive, number three, with the United Nations at the center of it all. As a country with the 2/3 of our population below the age of 25, the outlook on the future and emphasis on intergenerational equity is so important to us. Our government seeks to harness this democratic dividend by investing in its youthful population and energetic members of our population for a better future. We therefore support the establishment of the UN Youth Office at the UN here. This should encourage meaningful youth engagement in diverse ways, such as in political representation, access to lifelong skills training and education, support to youth innovation, and indeed entrepreneurship, decision-making, and all the spheres of life, including climate change and environmental protection. Mr. President, in spite of the steady progress made towards curbing the COVID-19 pandemic, we still need to remain vigilant to guard